Welcome back. I've got Julie Cropp Gareleck on. Julie, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you today?
I am awesome. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a bit. So why don't you share a little bit about you, and then we're going to jump into the conversation and definitely talk about your new book.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me today. My background, I've been in the business world for 25 years. I've been the CEO and managing partner of Junction Creative, a digital marketing firm I started in 2009, and just recently worked on writing my first book, Dare to Become from the Corner Booth to the Corner Office, which will be available for folks on September 3rd.
Congratulations, and yet another one of those businesses that launched during the Great Recession. 2009, it was such a pinnacle year for so many businesses, and logic, if you want to call it that, would dictate, well, that's not exactly the best time to launch a business. But I disagree. I think it's a great time because what else? The world was a little wonky, especially in North America at that period of time. So you got an idea, you launch the business, and then, if you think back from 2009 to today, the amount of changes and transformations that we've had, both from a working way of life, but, personal living, technology, wars, pandemics. We've kind of jammed a lot of things in these last 15 years. So,
Yes.
congratulations again for, being bold and brave to, launch a business during that, really, really challenging time for a lot of people.
It was. And when I started the business, I had said to myself, look, it is the worst economy that I had lived through at that stage. If I could be successful in that economy, likely I would be able to manage success in a good economy, and thought at the time that that was going to be the biggest challenge that I faced. But as you just mentioned, COVID took us all by storm. And while the business still did very well during COVID, it was definitely more on the interpersonal side and how people were engaging and acting. So definitely fit a lot in the last 15 years.
Yeah, and I think back to that time where a lot of organizations really had to pivot and how they did business. Not dramatically, but it was significant enough where before it wouldn't take, any, really real effort to say, you know what, I'll come to your office, we'll go over these things, we'll design the plan and roll it out and everything will be fine. Well, for a period of time we weren't allowed to do that. So we all
Right.
had to use Zoom or Teams or technology and other things, which was easy for a lot of people, but really, really hard for another. And I remember working, there was an insurance organization, a multi-state organization that I was doing a little bit of help with during the pandemic, and specifically with their salespeople, because their executive leadership were concerned because sales were dropping during the pandemic, and
Yes.
and they were saying people still need insurance, and if anything, they might need more because there's some potential liability now because they're working from their homes instead of the offices. So there's a lot of things to look at. So the salespeople are normally really good at landing new business. Initially, we're having a really difficult time with it because they were used to doing the face-to-face meetings, going
Exactly.
out for lunch, going out on the golf course, wherever they happened to conduct business. And that's how they did it. And all of a sudden, they weren't allowed to do that. So they had to get comfortable using Zoom. And many of them weren't comfortable with that. So one of the things, I did, and, this was a suggestion from somebody else, so I'm not taking full credit for it, but it made a ton of sense. And I said, okay, and most, a lot of these salespeople were a little bit older, so they were, they had grandkids and things like that. And I said, you know what? Jump on a Zoom call or Teams or whatever you're using with your grandkids 2 or 3 times a week. So just get used to the platform, play with different buttons.
Mhm.
So, they would do that. And of course, in Zoom and other things, you can, make cartoon faces and put makeup on and all that kind of stuff. And just have a
Yes.
blast with it. Get comfortable with it. Get over that fear of this app. I mean, you've been using Excel forever. This Zoom is just another app. It's just, yeah,
Exactly.
you're looking at a screen. Okay, you're going to be looking at somebody's eyes if you're face to face, and that's not a problem for you. So it was more or less just kind of giving them their confidence back, saying, look, you can sell water to the ocean. So you're going to be able to do this. And it was a really quick turnaround once they got over that hurdle of being afraid of this streaming application. And I think again, for businesses, and tie this into your new book, is sometimes you have to dare yourself, and sometimes you're scared, and that's a natural human condition.
Exactly.
We're kind of, the amygdala kind of does that for us, whether we like it or not.
Yep.
We kind of protect ourselves, but sometimes you have to step past that or step through that and go and acknowledge, like, yeah, I'm afraid, but I'm going to do it anyway. And you dare yourself, and you grow. So we'll segue into the book. And I ask authors this all the time when I have them on the show. What motivated you to write the book? Because it is a very time-consuming endeavor. Lots of things you need to do about it. But I'd love to hear your story on how the book came about, and then we'll dive into what the book's all about.
Yeah, the motivation for writing the book really came once we were out of COVID. I had reached 13 years in business and had reached some new milestones that I had set for myself, and really found myself not in a rut, but almost sort of paralyzed in terms of figuring out what my next step was. And it felt strange because it was 13 years in business. It's not as though it was my first or second year. And I was really struggling to find inspiration and to find camaraderie or other folks that were going through what I was going through. And so I happened to keep a journal from the time I was 16 years old. And I went back and read through journals that I'd written as I've progressed from a teenager, working for my parents' restaurant, and then transitioning into the corporate world and ultimately starting my own business. It was in that process that I had an opportunity to look back and see just how far I'd come. And in reading those pages, revisiting my 20-year-old self, I was fearless. I was ready to take on the world and build this big life that I wanted. And I wasn't afraid. And it reminded me of how far I'd come. And even though I'm not a billion-dollar entrepreneur, I've made some pretty good progress over the course of the last 25 years. And it was as a part of that this book then sort of took shape. I decided to write a book that was reflective of my journey working for my parents' restaurant, and how the lessons they so richly taught me set me up to get ahead in my career once I went into the corporate world. And so it's a prescriptive bio. I tell lots of great stories about things I've experienced, some good, some bad. But it's just really about my journey from the corner booth at the restaurant to the corner office.
I had a gentleman, Gene Slade, yesterday on the show, and he started, his dad was in the HVAC business, and he, has grown on to do some amazing things in that industry and helping other HVAC and trades organizations do a better job with lead generation and things and follow-ups and things like that, which historically that sector is not really good at. They tend to be more reactionary, like, oh, I have a broken pipe or my air conditioning's not working. In the
Exactly.
summer, in the summertime, that is a big deal. When it's dead of winter and you're in the northwest or northeast, maybe not so bad. But if it's a hot Atlanta summer, you're going to want that air conditioning to work. But uh, very similar to your situation, he started off working in the family business. And I encourage people, and I know a lot of people that did that, and some of them were really thrilled by it, some of it grumbled about it, but literally you are getting access to how to run a business
At
front,
a
hand,
young age.
center. Yeah, at a very young age, and be a sponge. So and it's really, really important. Both of my parents, they worked for other organizations, so I didn't have that opportunity. But my first job was a family-owned grocery store. So, and I was aware enough of the dynamics of the family. And personally, our family knew that family, and my mom had worked at one point with one of the executives there. So familiar. And actually, in the too much information department, her water broke when at that grocery store when I was born. So, and I was destined to work there, which was kind of funny. And this was back. They had carpet in the grocery store back then, which you think
Oh,
about it now, it's like, why in the world would they do that? But back then they thought, no, it's comfortable and all that stuff. Well, the
yeah.
carpet got ripped out of the grocery store after that. So I'm to thank slash blame for that transition to floors that are much easier to clean. But
Yeah.
but again, it's those lessons of dynamics and family dynamics and people dynamics and being able to more or less separate, work and home type of thing, even though sometimes those things can blur. But we see that even if we're working for an organization now where, those lines can blur a little bit, but ultimately it's those lessons that you learn. And you working at a restaurant, you're dealing with customers, you're dealing with every type of customer, every income level, you name it, and you get to understand people because it's one of those basic human needs. They need to eat, and you're there serving them and working with them. And a lot of times, and I'm sure this happened even in your young age, where if a customer came in and they weren't having the greatest of days, yeah, they might be a little rude, but a lot of times because they feel safe in that restaurant, especially if they're a regular patron, they feel safe. They'll share their stories, they'll share the challenges they're facing. And when you have an environment like that, boy, does that make a huge difference. And taking those lessons, you can apply that throughout your career. So again, working at a grocery store or a gas station or at a restaurant are so critically foundational for people. So whenever I talk to kids and I say, what should my first job be? I said, well, this, or this, because you're going to be working with every dynamic of individual if you're in that, which is going to serve you well throughout your career.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think you've just summarized likely the book, right? When I worked for my parents at the time, I was 16 and, was pretty indignant, right? Hated the fact that I had to work all of those hours. We served breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So that restaurant was open from, sunrise to sunset, if you will. And I, at the time, realized that after the first year or so, I realized the opportunities that I was seeing and, being able to engage with individuals from all walks of life, whether that was from an employee perspective or from a customer perspective. And it really did help develop my ability to communicate, my ability to work through conflict resolution because not every customer was happy. And sometimes customers were unhappy, not because of anything we had done, but maybe because of the day they had had. So it really was instrumental in providing me with a foundation for my work ethic and believe that as a result of that experience, when I did graduate from college, I felt years ahead of where I should have been at that point. Because when you are managing 25 people or even 5 people at the age of 20, that's even though it might be in a restaurant setting, that's still a lot of responsibility to carry. And so as I went forward in my career, even with my first position, I was working a lot of hours, but it wasn't quite as intense as what it was like to work for the family business. So it set me up for success for sure.
Yeah, I always encourage people, especially if they're going in a particular trade or profession, if they can work in an internship type of thing, or and for me, my bachelor's degree is in accounting, so I worked in an accounting firm. I did a co-op situation in high school. When I left that grocery store that I mentioned before and started working for an accounting firm, and I worked there for 8 years. So throughout college, I worked there, and a couple times only took a couple of tests for me to realize that real life accounting and academic accounting sometimes don't equal debits equal credits. And there was a couple questions I got wrong, and I'm like arguing with the professor and then arguing with the partner at the firm, and I'm like, do I bring you two together to hash this out? I'm like, no, I know when I'm in class, just regurgitate what they tell me there, and then I'll try not to apply it too much there, or I'll get corrected, whatever. But
Yeah.
again, it's those life experiences. And when people are, entering the workforce, in many cases, their work experience is whatever it happens to be. But for somebody like myself that has been fortunate enough to work in a lot of different industries and work with a lot of different sectors, I'm thrilled that I paid attention as much as I could to the nuances of those things. But ultimately, it comes down to how do you deal with people? How do you resolve their problems? How do you leave it better than you found it type of mentality? And by doing that, it it's helped me be able to navigate through challenging times, whether it was job shift changes or the sector or revenue issues or fundraising issues in the nonprofit sector or just economic downturns or you name it. Those problem solving skills that you pick up in your youth, pay attention because you will use them a lot and you'll learn as you go along. Never stop learning. I always tell people that. That's why I love having authors on the show because your perspectives and your experiences be dramatically different or very similar to mine, but there's somebody that could be reading your book or listening to this podcast and realizing, wow, that resonates with me. And now I'm going to do that, or I feel brave enough to go do that thing that I've been really wanting to do, but I've kind of hold myself back a little bit. And that's what I love about this format. And I love having conversations like this because we want to encourage people to go for it. Please
Absolutely.
go
Yeah.
for it.
I mean, I was fortunate in that, my parents, even though they started their careers working for corporate companies, and then decided they took the leap of faith to invest in themselves. And as a child, to see your parents believe so strongly in their ability and watching them do it, right? Watching them actually build and grow a business, it was the best experience. And not everybody will have that. And so, part of writing Dare to Become was really that I wanted to share a story and show people that, I didn't come from, a super wealthy background. I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I didn't even finish my MBA, right? And I was still able to put together a business plan, build and grow a business, sustain it, for 15 years. And I'm just like every other small business owner out there. And I think sometimes we get caught up with the, $100 million side hustle and the, all of the glamour that comes with owning a business. And at the end of the day, to your point, it's definitely a scary endeavor. And you definitely do have to dare yourself to step out on faith, invest in yourself, and really be committed to building something that you can be very proud of.
It's like the analogy, I think it's a quote that was attributed to Abraham Lincoln. If you have 2 hours to cut down a tree, I'm going to spend like an hour and 45 minutes sharpening the saw. And that's what building a business is. It's sharpening the saw. It's getting better. It's trying things. You fail. It's trial and error in a lot of cases, but working with other people that have done the work, maybe a couple years ahead of you and talking with them, getting ideas, being part of networks. There's so many different things you can do, but I'm again, a huge advocate of books. I've been a reader since I was a little dude, and I love when stories come through because what it does is one, it gives you different perspective, and you're like, wow, this is amazing that this happened, but it also reminds you of the stories that you have in yourself and you
Correct.
forget them because life tends to kind of move the file cabinet around a little bit and you forget different things. And going back to what you said a moment ago about journaling, I've
Yeah.
got I've got probably a dozen journals that are filled with handwritten notes. I've kind of moved to digital, but there's something about tactile, and I know there's been studies on the handwriting is something that actually
Yes.
transfers a lot more and retains stuff on there. So I've got all of these written journals when I launched my business back in 2016.
Yeah.
And occasionally I'll grab one and
Yeah.
I'll just look through it. And they're 100 pages or so and written notes and I
Yeah.
look at them and I go I definitely worked in healthcare because a lot of this writing looks like doctor writing because what is that word? I wrote it. I can't tell you what that word is. So I'm like, hmm.
Sure.
But going back to what you said earlier as well, I look at that and I go, wow. One, I'm amazed at how little I knew back then, and
Mhm.
two, how much I know now.
Exactly.
And it's all those stumbles, the falls, bricks thrown at you, hopefully, figuratively, not literally,
Mhm.
but you take those and you use them as a foundational step to get to where you want to get. It's not a straight line. It's quite squiggly and tangled up like, if you have wired earphones, we all know what that's like in our pocket. It's like, I'm going to put it in the pocket, fold it and pull it out. It's like, it's in 15 knots. Like, how in the world did that happen? But
Well,
that's what work in life is like, but it's the journey.
It is. And fortunately, and really what I communicate in the book too is that we're all going through a journey, whether we're starting a career, whether we're growing in a career, whether we're thinking through wanting to start a business, or maybe we've had a business for 10 years and we're struggling because it's not been a great year. I wanted the book to be, a story that someone could relate to, someone could feel inspired by, that, hey, they've gone through the same thing, but somebody else is also experiencing this. And I do say in the book that it is in the rising and the falling that we evolve as people, and we evolve as entrepreneurs as well. And the Julie that started the business in 2009, I'm still the same person in theory, but I definitely am a bit more weathered and I'm more experienced. And I look back and read those journals and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just went for it, and I think I had forgotten some of that along the way as life happens.
Yeah, it's getting rid of the safety net because,
Hmm.
you have a safety net. It's like, okay, well, if it doesn't work, I'll go to bed knowing, of course you can be upset, that's a natural emotion, but you were in the game.
Exactly.
I'd much rather launch and do something and have it fail than not do it all and wonder if I did that, if that would have been. I don't want to do that. So I don't even spend time focusing on them. Like, okay, what do I need to do today that will
Exactly.
move things forward? And keep that to-do list short for a day. I mean, you can have the master to-do list, as long as you want it to be, but quoting Brian Tracy, just pick a couple things that are going to move things forward today. And the more painful one, do that first. Eat the frog
Exactly.
first. It's like you hate it, but you know what? And time again, if there's anything that I've delayed, like even for days or even weeks, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna do it. I don't care. I'm just gonna do it. And like half an hour later, it's done. And I literally look him at the mirror and I look and go, "What's wrong with you?" Of
Oh,
course, I'm
I
laughing.
say things, yeah,
Yeah, I'm
all
not,
the time.
yeah, I'm
And then
not
I get
beating
it
my,
done. And it's
yeah,
crazy. It's like, why didn't I do that a week ago? I mean, it was sitting like on my back the entire week. And then once it's done, it's like, oh, okay. So I work better with deadlines.
yeah, yeah. Deadlines are really important for me too, because otherwise it just ends up being this collection of things to do. And my the app that I use to keep track of my to-dos and action items and all that stuff. It can ebb and flow and it can get, much like my dog, and get a little furry with things that needs to get to the groomer and kind of cleaned up a little bit. But ultimately, I find that saying, okay, today I'm going to work on this because and it's going to move things forward. And I think uh, going back to your comment about being weathered, I think that's experience of realizing that, okay, yeah, there's this thing on my to-do list. Is that going to move things forward? Is it a nice to do? Is it going to do anything that's going to benefit things, or can it wait? And if it can wait, how do I feel about that waiting? Because that's something too that a lot of times we don't ask ourselves. It's like, am I going to feel bad about putting that off, or would I feel better by actually doing it,
Exactly.
even if it's not moving forward? And that's the beautiful thing about the work that we get to do, is you have that choice. And every day is different, but
Yes.
just aim to, okay, what do I get to do today? It's a
Yeah.
mind shift. Not what do I have to do, but what do I get to do? That's a John Gordon quote. It's
Yep.
simple. It's one word. Instead of, you get rid of the have to and you put get to. And it's a mind shift. But ever since I implemented that in my life, it has made a humongous difference in me getting more things done that need to get done. And I think that's one of the great things about your book, is it's going to give people that encouragement to be able to move forward and get things done, and leverage the tools and skills you've picked up along the way.
Exactly. No, absolutely. And it's to your point about, the to-do list and knocking it down and the, have to versus get to. I was explaining to someone just yesterday that, even though there are challenging times, right? Even publishing this book, I'm finding that even though I can run a digital marketing agency, this publishing game is it's not one that I care for. It's very difficult to navigate, but I will say that it's all gravy. I took a chance, I wrote a book, I found a publisher, and it's going to be on shelves. And so I look at that, and even when I'm faced with these challenges or a to-do list that feels like it's forever, look at what I do get to do. It's pretty amazing. And like you said, when you make that mind shift and you see it from that perspective, you'll be more productive.
Just remember, less than 1% of the human race have published a book. So
Yes, it's crazy, right?
when you see that book on your local bookshelf, make sure you take a picture of it, you holding it and smiling at it, because it's from you. It was birthed from you in the experiences. And I encourage people. I say, I think I want to write a book. I'm like, write it.
Mhm.
Even if it's crap, write it.
Right. Mhm.
Because your perspective is unique to you, and it can, if it changes one life.
Exactly.
I get chills thinking about that. It's like, and I get comments, on the books that I've been fortunate enough to publish, that, someone says, yeah, I did this and I implemented this. And I'm like, okay, I'm not the only one that thought that was a good idea. Okay, great, awesome. I
Exactly.
was like, thank you for that. And that's the thing. It's a gift. It's our gift to people, and they, the readers, when they comment on it, it's a wonderful gift to get the feedback of, yeah, I did this and I made this change, and now I'm doing this, and now I can do this, and it gets to the point where, I even get a little emotional about it, even thinking about it, because I'm like, okay, I just helped, just by my experiences, improve that individual's life. I don't know them. I don't know them,
Exactly.
but I did something about that. And to be able to get to do that is an absolute superpower. And it just makes things so much better. So love this
Exactly.
conversation. Where can people find out more about you? Obviously in the show notes, we'll have a link to the book and all that, but where can people find out more about you if they want to learn more?
Absolutely. They can go to my website, which is www.juliecroppgarelick.com. You can also find more information about the book, speaking opportunities, trainings that we do with corporate companies. But that's the best landing page to find all of our social links and things like that. And as far as the book goes, it is available for pre-sale on virtually every bookshop worldwide. So whether it's Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Hudson, books, it's available for you, whether you have a local bookshop or you want to go online. So
Yeah, I'll definitely have that in show notes, and highly encourage people to go pick up the book. I know I'll be one of them. So congratulations again, Julie. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate you, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.